It's not the person, it's the function that makes the relationship or the place. Back when we were children, we had friends, we had people that we played with on the playground, on the streets, within our homes, within the corridors, the passages, maybe within our buildings, within our apartment complexes. And life was simple then. Relationships were simple. There wasn't much that we were responsible for. Well, what we were responsible for mostly was coming home on time, keeping ourselves clean, and doing whatever homework that we had. Life was simple enough, but it was enough for a child. It was enough for a child to take in, for a child to deal with, for a child to grow, to learn, to find themselves on who they wanted to become, who they were, and how they socialized with other people within their group, within their community in which they lived in. But as we grew, the people that we chose to spend our time with, the people that we chose to form relationships with, a lot more factors had to be included. We couldn't just look at their personality, if they were likable or not, or if we hated them or hated some particular attribute that they had, or we might have made friends because we found someone pretty, beautiful, or gorgeous, and we didn't particularly make friends with the people that we didn't find particularly attractive. Our criteria, our requirements for the people that we chose to form relationships with were rather simple, were rather shallow, and we didn't look as to who that person was or who they portrayed themselves to be or what attributes they were born with. But as you grow old, as you start to take in more of the world, you find that there are other things that are more important than maybe who the person is. And you will find that the people in your life, the people that form relationships with you, don't necessarily form them because of who you are, of whatever particular attributes you might have, whether you're likable, whether you are smart or good looking. For as we grow old, our relationships become more functional. They're more goal orientated. Not in a sense as to use each other, as to use each other as tools in a sense and dispose of each other when that use is no longer required or that particular need is no longer being met. But this is still an important aspect and an aspect that you must consider and must think of when you go out into the world and meet people, form relationships, form friendships, form love affairs, and maybe with those that you get into marriages with. For now, there's this function as you grow old. You have responsibilities, you have things that you have to meet. Maybe you want to have children, you want to build a home. For that too is a function and it requires work, it requires effort, it requires competence, skill, and ability. Or maybe you want to build a business or pursue a business venture. For that is also a function, and that too requires intellect, skill, resourcefulness, charisma, communication skills, and all the other things that business people require that may be useful in negotiations. For in these functions, we form our relationships. And maybe you may form relationships with people that you don't particularly like, people that may be unpleasant to be around, but they get the job done and they do the job well. And for you, that is what you need. You may not necessarily need to like someone, you may not need to find them attractive for you to form a relationship with them. A long lasting relationship, a relationship that can be very fruitful for the both of you in the long run. For now, function takes precedence over personality, over likability, and maybe over personal looks or whatever attribute that may be endearing about a person. The function takes precedence over the person themselves. And maybe this is something that we don't pay much attention to. This is something that we don't think about when we get into relationships. For the underlying function may be present at the beginning, but we may delude ourselves. We may fall into the illusion that this relationship has been formed because of the person, because of their personality, because of who they are, who you may think you are, or what your being consists of. But this is still a delusion, and one you must break out of as you grow older, for it may lead you down a very, very dark path. Because the people that you bring into the life, the people you form relationships with, your friends, and most importantly, the people you choose to form romantic relationships or marry, influence you in a very, very, very big way. They influence you even if you do not want to be influenced. They influence you even if you are cognizant of their influence on you. For you do become the people that you surround yourself with. And this is very important as you think about the person that you want to become, as you think about your goals, what outcomes you want out of life, who you want to become, who you see yourself becoming. And in that, you can kind of like shape your friends, shape your partners into that person, or choose the person that you want to become in your partners, in your friendships. And maybe that would be good for not only you, but for your friends as well. When we think about the people that we want to be friends with, or the people that we want as romantic partners, maybe we have to ask ourselves an important question as to, would we want to be this person if our lives were switched? If we took whatever being, whatever essence that makes up the life, the breath that we take, and placed it into this other person's body, this other person's mind, this other person's being, would we be content? Would we be satisfied with the life that we are living, with the life that we are leading? Or would we be satisfied with where that life is headed? And if not, then maybe we should sit and reconsider that maybe we have not been as wise as we thought we were in our choosing of our friends or romantic partner. We should always think of the function, of the friends, of the partners that we have in our lives, as to what is our underlying function, or what is the underlying function of the relationship that we have, for the function forms the relationship. How long is this function going to last? Where is it leading? And how efficiently, how well can we perform this function? Or how useful is our union in performing this function? And to think about this deeply, to contemplate it, and maybe write down the pros and cons would probably save us from a lot of disappointments in our relationships, in our friendships, when they don't pan out in the way that we wished and hoped they would. They would save us from maybe grandiose expectations that we may have had of the people, of the friends that we have in our lives. For maybe we'd come to see that they weren't built or have no desire to fulfill whatever function that we want from this relationship. And from that, we may choose to either distance ourselves or accept that the function will never be met and that this relationship has a different function. For being blind to the function of the relationships that we have can be very dangerous, because you do not control how much influence the people in your lives have over you, for it is something that you absorb subconsciously. It's not something you can choose. It's not something that you can sit down and pick as to which is good and which is bad. And in a sense, the people that you pick to be in your life, in which the function is not well observed, in which you do not sit down and think about what function these people serve within your life. If this function is one that is destructive, if it is one that would lead you off your goals, what you want to achieve, who you want to become, where you want to lead your life to, these people can derail your life. And this is something that you only realize when it's too late. For you may have had friends or romantic partners, or maybe close familial people and relationships, where the primary function of the other was to bring you down, was to hinder you, hinder your growth, hinder whatever goals you may have had, and to basically make sure it was as hard as possible to achieve, if not outright impossible for you to proceed with your life, with your goals. For they would have achieved their function in destroying whatever function that you wanted to achieve. So you must always be cognizant of not only what function you expect from the other in which you are in a relationship with, but also what function they expect from you, for these may differ, these may not be the same, and this can cause conflict down the road. For back in the day, our parents used to police our relationships. They used to inspect and look at our friends as to if they were good for us, if they would help us grow, if they would lead us down the right path, a path of light, a path of growth, of enlightenment, where we would achieve our goals, where we would grow, where we would progress in life. And they would also police the romantic partners that we chose, for they too can come into your life as a destructive force. For our parents would have been older, and with age, they would have understood more about life, about people, about the dynamics of relationships. And in their understanding, they would have forgiven less. And in this unforgiveness, they would have come to knowledge, understanding, and wisdom as to who to choose as partners, who to choose as friends, as to what are the telltale signs of good friends or bad friends, of good relationships and bad relationships. But that was in the past. Our parents no longer perform this duty, this responsibility, and this function. This is something that we must learn to do ourselves as we grow. And hopefully, we learn it before it's too late, before the people that we have formed relationships with have caused too much destruction. For friendship should be an end in itself. But you notice this precedence of function over the person, over the personality, when relationships begin and when relationships end. For when relationships end, it's usually when principles are broken. Principles that were formed by the function of the relationship, by whatever one partner expected from the other, something the partner did not deliver, or maybe a very tacit condition that was always underlying in the function of the relationship. Not as for the relationship to be transactional, but that as long as that function was present, as long as that principle was present, the function of the relationship could continue. And if ever that principle would be broken, then the function would no longer work. And in the deterioration of the function, the relationship would no longer be viable, no matter how likable the person was, no matter how endearing their personality is, the relationship comes to an end. We see this mostly in romantic relationships. Let's say a man marries a woman in order to start a family, and we find that the woman cannot bear him any children. We've heard many tales, many stories of women getting divorced, women being left by men because of this. For the man got into the relationship in order to start a family, in order to have a family with this woman. And when this function could no longer be met, as heartbreaking as it is, as difficult as it may be for not only the man, but most especially the woman, the man must make a choice as to whether he wants to continue with the relationship or not. For the function would now be different. It would no longer be to start and have a family. They would have to be in this marriage for a different reason. We see this also in women friend groups, when, let's say, one of their friends get married and all the other are single. Oftentimes the single friends feel like they are looked down upon by the married friend for the function of the relationship between her friends has been changed by the function of her marriage. For she is no longer a single woman and can no longer partake in the activities that she used to partake in with her friends. Their function has changed. She needs a different function and most probably a different friend group. A friend group that can satisfy this new function that has been formed within this marriage. For, in a sense, she would need a new friend group, a new community that can maybe provide support in her growing her family, growing her marriage. Maybe friends with experience, friends that can give advice, friends that can counsel her, maybe advise and motivate her to grow her marriage, to raise her children well, and to live a prosperous and happy life as a wife and as a mother. This is a different function that requires a completely different community. For women form communities. And I think it was Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics that contemplated that only men have friends, and not in the kind of utilitarian sense, but friends in which they sit and talk to about things. For these friendships also have a function as to kind of direct and correct one party when they may be making a bad decision or going down the wrong path. For we look for advice from our friends, we look for criticism into our life, maybe criticism that is indifferent, for that is the best criticism. For we can trust indifference as it has no stake in the pie. Indifference does not care, and therefore indifference can be truthful without being hurtful, without any bias, and without any stereotypes. We all know that men and women can't be friends, for the underlying function of the friendship is always determined by our biology, and our biology demands procreation. And in that, that will always be the underlying function of any friendship between a man and a woman, whether we like it or not. And if we may try to form these friendships, we may try to mitigate our biological prerogative, our biological need, our biological function, then this may cause pent up emotions and stress down the line as these needs are not met, whether sexually or emotionally. For a man can divorce himself from his emotions and maybe only perform the sexual function. But for a woman, sex and emotions are one of the same thing, for they are more in tune with their bodies. Their being is enveloped within their bodies. They are more or less one of the same. And one function always comes with another for them. Unlike men, for there can never be a neutral outcome between a man and a woman locked inside a room together. It's either they will grow and fall madly in love with each other, or they will grow to hate each other's guts. It is always those two outcomes and nothing else. I think the best display and example of this precedence of function over the person is the ruthlessness that you see within women when a better function presents itself as an opportunity over whatever current relationship that they may have. For they will stop at nothing and will take all measures to kind of like grab this opportunity and let go of whatever relationship, whatever lesser function they may have been in order to obtain to be inside this new relationship with a greater function. And I do not think that this is malicious on their part. I think it's just a function of survival, a function of opportunity, of reproducing and creating fit and viable offsprings that will survive into the future. You experience this loss of function, this loss of relationships when you reach milestones in your life, when you change your environment, or maybe you move from primary to maybe a higher grade school, when you move from grade school to university, when you change your courses, when you move from university to the workplace, when you get married, when you change jobs, when you change careers. More often than not, the people that you have relationships with within these spaces do not come along with you, and these relationships slowly die out. For now, the function is no longer present. Maybe this is something we should come to accept and maybe not grieve too deeply or for too long. Maybe we should come to know to take initiative as to end relationships when we discover that the function is not what we think it is. The function is not leading you to where you want to go. It is not turning you to the person that you need to become. This is a hard thing to do, but an act that is necessary nonetheless.